up, everybody? Welcome on in. That was an awesome facial expression.
We're live. Oh no!
That's it. Welcome on into It's Official, the WooWoo Hour podcast. Now a Vodcast is back. So glad that you can join us. If you are hanging out with us live here in the mixer, that is fucking awesome. You will be able to ask questions, give us your thoughts, all that good stuff. If you're listening to this later in podcast or over on the YouTube channel or somewhere on my website, hello, don't forget that you can join us live on Mixer Sunday and Monday nights at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, mixer.com/Crystal Storm. I do gaming, I do these interviews, we do geek stuff, we do web design, we do fucking book reviews. Speaking of book reviews, we are reviewing this month A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. That's at the end of the month. So this is the second book in her series. So read it and then come hang out with us at the end of the month. We're going to spoil it. First we'll do no spoilers, then we'll do spoilers, kind of like how we did with the boys. But tonight...
We should just spoil it all.
We are. I mean, when I'm talking about books, I got to spoil them at some point. Because you really got to, you got to talk. You got to let go, like, your feelings. You have feelings. You have to express your feelings.
I have feelings. I do have feelings.
Sin is awesome, guys. Tonight, Sin is back. Sin was on with Jay. Jay ditched us. We're playing. Jay had bad weather. Jay ditched us. Whatever.
Jay's
weather.
I do. So
I know, right? Weather.
I just think his area is a little more low-lying. So
maybe. I mean, Shortlandia. It's rough in Shortlandia. But Sin is here tonight as my first guest for the WooWoo Hour podcast this year, and I am very excited about our topic because we're going to talk about sacred prostitution. Do not get it twisted. Whatever you think you know, you probably don't know. And I'm going to let Sin introduce yourself. Sin, give us your background. Tell us all about you. Why do you know about this stuff?
Yeah, let's see. Been published author since 2003. I am a major mythology buff. I love history, so I've worked for research for a lot of historians and archaeologists, so both in Egypt and in Greece. So
that sounds so fun.
Oh god, dude, I knew about the new KV sites that came out.
Wait, what are the KV sites?
KV sites are in the Valley of the Kings. So the KV sites are like when they found. You probably remember the big TV thing that they had when they found the new site that. They had the coffin.
Oh, that black sarcophagus and that kind of stuff. Yeah. I remember.
And they weren't sure if it was they weren't sure if it was for the nurse that was there. That was been for Tutankhamun. That's for Tutankhamun's nurse, or if it would have been Akhenaten's actual funeral place. So I actually knew about it 3 weeks before it went public.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
And I had to sit on it because it was like, dude. So, yeah, there was a bunch of us who kind of knew about it. And so for 3 weeks, we kind of were like, we can't say
anything. Right. We're not allowed. We're not
allowed
to talk about this.
No. And it was awesome because we actually got to see pictures early. And we were like, look at the stuff. Oh, my God.
I'm so jelly right now.
Yeah. So we got to see lots of pictures and such. So it was...
That's very cool. By the way, guys, do not yell at me for adjusting the video. I did this, so I got on this conversation with Sin 15 before it started, and I adjusted her video. And then as soon as I hit the live button, she moved. So now I just had to, you're not allowed to move anymore. No more moving. No move. All right. So, Sin, my interest in sacred prostitution really revolves around, I love all that type of woo-woo stuff. I love ancient history. I love all that kind of stuff, like mystery schools, everything. And I feel like we've got a very twisted, unhealthy version of that sort of thing nowadays. We do. And I'm really interested for it because of book research, because in my third book, as I dive into world building and such, I really want to kind of educate and have it be a part of my fictional universe. So let's just dive right into it. I don't even know where to ask you. Where do you want to start in this very large topic? Let's start with this. For anybody who doesn't know, that walks in here and thinks that we're just talking about $2 hookers. By the way, there's nothing wrong with $2 hookers. Pay your hookers more. Sex work should be legal.
Damn straight.
Yeah. What is sacred prostitution? Yeah, absolutely. Tax it, do it. It should be a legit profession.
So sacred prostitution, depending on when in time you're talking about it and who you ask. And if you go current day standards for archaeologists and anthropologists, sacred prostitution actually takes place for rites and rituals, um, in regards to the idea of profiting the land. So basically, it's in regards to the status of the land, promoting fertility and crops, et cetera, et cetera. There are certain types of rituals that are supposed to be done during that time frame. Usually certain festivals during the year, that kind of process. Now, I'm going to tell you this because this is actually one of the biggest things that have come out since the 90s, is that in the 1800s, when archaeology first started and anthropology first really got going, there was a big, huge thing that when they found a lot of these, or what they considered erotic look of papyrus and decorations on walls and things of this nature, they thought that there was all these big fertility rites and that this was like a widespread, that there had to be prostitution among the streets. The texts of Herodotus and more, Straub and all that was all adding to this whole thing of sacred prostitution everywhere.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, not so. Basically,
sorry guys.
Sorry. So the whole idea of that a woman sat on the side of the road during a couple of years prior to her getting married and waiting for a silver coin to be tossed into her lap for her first time to have sex is basically a huge myth. There's no evidence of it in any kind of documentation that can be found. However, there are texts that are related to not only the hetare, which is the Greek slaves that worked in the temples that were basically freed basically in service of the temple. So a lot of times they were used in prostitution, both male and female.
Okay.
You also have in ancient Egypt, there were sacred prostitution involved, and that was in the service of Amun-Ra. So there are, in different areas of different time frames, sacred prostitution. Now, here's the big thing when it comes to ancient Egypt and to certain time frames in Roman times and in Greek. And if we want to get into it, Samaria and Babylonia.
Okay.
A lot of these. So yeah. So we're talking about a lot of this happens as you became an adult, before you became an adult. So let's talk about it in terms of ages.
Okay.
Back then, most people only lived to age 30, 40.
Right.
You became an adult by the time you were 12.
Oof, that's rough.
Well, you got to think about it.
Yeah.
But
if my lifespan is 40, then by 12, that's a whole different mindset.
So basically, by then you're already getting your period, you're getting all this stuff, and by then you've already learned all the hard lessons you need to learn in life in order to start working and doing stuff. So one of the things is they would take you, by the time you had your first menstruation, would take you to serve in the temple.
Okay.
And a lot of favorite daughters, beautiful daughters, would be taken to the temple to serve for their first 2 years. The idea is that they would be blessed by the gods, and that would actually allow them to become considered treasures and would be able to give a lot of poor people a chance to be given a bigger dowry from the temple and be able to move up in society. So that's where a lot of that kind of thought process comes from.
Okay, let me pause just because I have some questions about that before we dive into more depth into it. So basically, what would happen then is you come 12, you hit your puberty age. They're like, okay, so if you're particularly a good looking chick, they're like, yes, you go be in service in the temple. And so what does that involve basically in service to the temple? Now I know it sounds like it's really wrapped around religion, but does that mean that just anybody comes in and gets to sleep with you, or is there some kind of like ritual involved? Like, how does that work?
So it really depends on the gods and goddesses involved. So a lot of times, So a lot of times it could be more than you're just actually working in the temple, whether it be helping the priests and the priestesses out, becoming one of the sacred dancers. Sacred dancers were untouchable.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some sacred dancers were, but it was only during certain times of the year.
Okay.
So it always depends on whom you're serving. So like if you served a Nana, in Babylonian, or if you serve Ishtar, if you're going Sumerian,
Okay.
then you're looking at the fact that you would, during certain times of the year, there are certain festivals that the priestly class, both men and women, were considered open to what was known as the the feast of blessing. So
Okay.
during that blessing time periods, they would actually be open for being blessed. And the blessing actually is the idea of fertility. So it's almost like the spring rituals that you hear about all the time with Beltane,
Okay.
that kind of aspect. So you would have that aspect of, you would be able to go in. There is, these kids are taught certain aspects of the religion first. They're taught how to serve, what it means to serve. Not, and the thing is that there is an aspect of, according to a lot of the notes that they have, of willingness. If you're not willing, it's not going to happen. Now, the other thing is that some families were known to give pressure. It's that whole aspect. Now, you got to also remember too, the word virgin doesn't always necessarily mean what we mean it to be now.
Really?
So, yeah, that's the other thing that we're going to discuss, because virgin way back when does not necessarily mean that untouched.
Okay.
So it does in an aspect, but there's more than one term for virgin. So the other meaning for virgin is like what Artemis was. She was a virgin goddess, which means she was whole and complete within herself. So it doesn't mean that she was chaste. There's actually no evidence for Artemis to not have sex, because she could have been a lesbian. She just chose not to be with a guy.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So
nice. So it sounds like at one point the term virgin was very empowering.
Yeah, it was actually.
Okay.
And it was actually considered a complete aspect of being a woman.
Okay.
And that's one of the things too, with being what sacred prostitution means back then, and in some instances in some societies today, is that it is an empowering, respectable aspect. It is where women are considered sacred objects. They, in like the Celtic belief system, that the only way to make a king is through a woman. You can only become a warrior through a woman. You could be trained all you want, but until you enter your final rite, which is where you get the blessing of a woman, you are not considered a true warrior.
Wow.
Miranda Green has some of the best writings regarding the Celtic warriorship and Celtic society out there. She's one of the best Celtic scholars out there.
Write that down right now. You said Miranda Green. I wasn't clear when I said I was taking notes. Yeah.
I actually have one of her books. It's called The Celtic World. It's huge. It's a
I bet it's a big read. What up, Blair? Welcome on into the channel. So that's really cool. So it sounds like, so what I'm learning now is, first of all, is that sacred prostitution was very much tied to the religion of the day. And hilariously, playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, which take place in Greece and in ancient Egypt, I'm learning how much they revered the gods. And you knew that, but like hilariously, like playing these video games really is putting you like in depth. And I'm sure they're only like scratching the surface, but I mean, it was everything. Like the worship of these gods, like, I mean, we kind of,
live and breathe.
Yeah, they lived and breathed it. So it sounds like it was an honor to go and serve. It wasn't just about sex. Either you were a dancer and you were revered for your dancing and movement, which I love. I find that very beautiful, because dancing is just what a wonderful way to just release energy and just celebrate something.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. But sex is the same way to do that. So it sounds like this wasn't just go in, you know, get your fucky on and then what. But yes, but it was like there was a purpose behind it. And it sounds like it was respected, and it was all about because of the gods, for a festival, to, you know, harvest or that sort of thing. So I like that. Sure. That's cool.
And I think that's one of the big things that most people, I mean, it was an idea that a lot of people back when the archaeology first started, anthropology first started really developing, it was the only way that they could make sense of what they thought they were seeing.
Okay.
But when evidence started coming back in and they realized that there was too many sacred prostitution cults coming up, and they re-reviewed a lot of stuff, they were like 90% of it could just disappear. It was literally just people having graffiti of sex everywhere.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
If you ever want to talk about Pompeii and Herculaneum, we could go through all that in the Lupinaria. So Lupinaria,
So
the whole sex brothels.
Yeah, see, okay, because that's where I thought, when I'm thinking sacred prostitution, you almost think that it's tied to those brothels. But you're like, that's like, these are like night and day things. Like, sure, there was fun and there were the brothels and they were not as uptight as some of us are now about sex. But then there was this like whole other aspect to it as well.
Well, there is, but there isn't, because here's the thing. In Babylon and in areas of Greece during certain time frames, depending on how far back you go, a lot of the brothels and stuff were owned by the priestly class. So they were actually attached to the temples.
Wow, that's awesome.
So when people would go to taverns and stuff, they went there and they would take part in the brothels. They were actually being serviced by prostitutes who were in service to the priestly class in the temple. So that money went straight to the temple anyway. It was taxed by the priestly class, taxed by the government. It was already tax run.
Right.
So yeah, it was already there. So there was no issue regarding stuff of that nature. Same thing too with ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt had their own things. And one of the things that most people don't understand about Egypt is different areas have different mythologies within certain areas, whether it be Upper and Lower Egypt.
Okay.
One of the aspects that's always the same, very similar, is the celebration of the sun god, which is Amun or Amun-Ra, depending if you which is basically two gods combined. With Ra, which is basically a circle with a dot in it. If you're looking at hieroglyphics, is that his was actually the largest class, and his was because he's considered the god of fertility, in the sense of that without the light you would not be able to grow things, versus the Osiris, who was the god of fertility and growth, and then the god of the underworld. When you have the mythology of him being murdered, Set, and then Isis bringing him back, you have all that area where you have the priestly class, you have their servant class, you also have the sacred prostitutes who were slaves, and one of the reasons that they can actually earn their freedom would be through that way. So you would have two sets of actual basically sacred prostitutes, ones who were in service trying to get their freedom, and those who would serve for a limited time and then go on back to their homes. So, and it was all part of Ma'at, which is the goddess of balance. So everything that went through Egypt was living through that whole thought process. Does it serve Ma'at? If it doesn't serve Ma'at, then it is not what's going to be accepted. And that's one of the reasons why when you get to the 18th dynasty and you get past Amenhotep III and then Akhenaten, that's why there's that whole aspect of problems, is because Akhenaten basically did away with all the gods and said there's only one god, Aten, and he's it.
Wow. And
suddenly he moved everybody to Amarna as the capital. And basically, a lot of people were very unhappy because now for them, Ma'at is out of balance.
Right.
So everything in the land, things were going bad. They moved inland away from the Nile.
Oh God.
So you had a whole bunch of stuff.
He just screwed everything up. Wow.
Yeah. And the whole thing about Oedipus Rex, that's based off of the whole concept of what was going on during the time of Akhenaten, which is what most scholars believe.
Wow.
So yeah, the story of Oedipus, the whole Oedipus Rex cycle is based off of what they think is a lot of the different things that people had learned through basically the news cycle, for lack of a better term, of what was going on with Akhenaten. So yeah, it was that whole aspect. So it's a tough thing. So when Tutankhamun came up and he basically was actually Tutankhaten, he actually went back into Thebes, ruled from there, changed his name to Tutankhamun, and then basically brought back the priestly class. And the priestly class was actually so pissed off at everything that happened that they basically tried to get rid of everybody's name for Nefertiti and Akhenaten and all that, because the goal was to basically at that point annihilate anything that destroyed the balance.
Oh wow.
Which it almost completely did, except for the fact that there were areas and tombs that had happened during the reign period that allowed for it to be completely known, which is why we know of Nefertiti. It's why we know of Akhenaten,
right?
Who's considered the heretic pharaoh.
Yeah, I could see why. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, without a doubt.
I mean, there were a lot of gods and goddesses just in Egypt, so I can't imagine all of a sudden you're like, no, they just don't exist anymore. Like, it was so ingrained, and that's crazy. That's just crazy. So I love the idea too that, so it sounds like sacred prostitutes were pretty revered and pretty respected. I mean, even if you were a slave, it sounds like they were still a level of respect if you were in that sort of profession.
Exactly. And the thing is you knew you couldn't abuse any of them, because then you would not be allowed back. And they were considered not only sacred property. So if you abuse them, you're abusing something that was chosen by the god.
Oh, and that's like, you don't do that. You don't do anything to piss off the gods.
Oh yeah. And there'd be a price to pay. And a lot of times that price is higher than what you would make in 2 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
Yeah, you would basically become in debt to the temple, and something that you just couldn't handle. Now, for those who may be into like BDSM and that, there were special prostitutes specifically for those proclivities.
Oh my god, that's amazing. That is amazing.
And there's a lot of those kinds of things are notated, in fact, by the Luminaria. The one that's actually in Pompeii actually had signs that they could still read that showed different things, like guys being whipped, being tied up.
Right.
I have pictures. I'll have to break them out one day and show you some of the signs and stuff. And one of the things how you knew where all the Luminarias were, if you were in Pompeii, is that they had signs of phallus right on the ground that showed your way to right
follow the penis and you will go. That is hilarious.
Not joking. It was like one of the funniest revelations ever, and it's one of the reasons why it never came out that there was graffiti, sex graffiti in Pompeii, is because the archaeologists of the 1800s, when Pompeii was first discovered.
Oh, I bet they were so like, I can't even.
They had vapors, dude. They had vapors. They did not tell nobody.
Clutching grandma's pearls, like, oh my god, there's a dick on the ground.
Well, one of the Egyptian gods has a big, huge penis,
right?
And there are lovely statues of him, and the Egyptologists of that time frame said those can never be shown in public, and basically put them in the back. And there's a lot of pictures and a lot of things that people have seen pictures of that are modified.
Oh my
god! Don't show. Yeah. Oh gosh.
They're just wrong. They're like, that's not how it really looks, though.
So when you actually see the real picture versus the modified picture, you're like, there's a dick involved. Shit. One of the biggest graffitis that is in Egypt that a lot of people hear about but don't necessarily get to see is one of Hatshepsut, who actually became basically pharaoh, first female pharaoh.
Okay. And
it's her being basically screwed by one of her lovers. Okay. And he said that basically she's basically nothing, kind of a thing, kind of like a cat call thing. And it's etched out on the side of a building.
Oh my god.
Has the graffiti, has the whole cartouche, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, it was like, well, and it has her bent over, the whole 9 yards, the dick going in. It was like great. I was like, how do we not know about this shit growing up? I mean, it's like, dude, sex graffiti. It's awesome.
Sex graffiti is awesome. Could you imagine? All right, so this sounds like, oh my god, they were so like, apparently
it's like
worshiping multiple gods really loosens you up and lets you appreciate things versus, these what's the part where the what's the
monotheisms?
Word? Thank you.
One god?
Oh my god, they're terrible. They're terrible. What's up, Camu? All right, so talk to me. How did it? What happened that changed it? Was it a shift in religion that took apart? Because you're telling me that just didn't happen in Egypt. This was happening in Greece. This was happening in Sumer, in Babylon. So at what point did sacred prostitution just go away?
So it did and didn't.
Okay.
So. All right, this is going to be the fun part of our. This is the
fun
part of our game.
Oh, I'm so excited!
So it didn't go away in some aspects. So here's a loveliness that for those of you who may be Catholics or have Catholic family.
Oh God, I was raised Catholic before I ditched that shit so quick.
So the early Catholic Church actually had brothels. And some of them were actually run right next door to the main Catholic Church in Rome. And in fact, a lot of places that had monasteries actually had brothels nearby, or actually had brothels in the monastery. And it was allowable up until, I want to say, like the 1200s. So yeah.
Now, see, this is very interesting me, because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but those women were probably treated a lot differently than women who were involved in sacred prostitution. Because Catholicism is all about the patriarchy. It's about men's superiority. There's no mot, there's no balance, there's no reverence of women. There's none of that. So these brothels sound like they're just there so priests can get their rocks off.
Pretty much. And there's the other fact of the matter, which was the idea of providing a safe haven for men. Believe it or not, for married men, so they would not go to two-bit prostitutes, that they would have a safe place where priests could basically control their flock.
You gotta be shitting me. Wait.
No, dude. Oh my God. How did you do that?
Oh my God, wait. So hold up. Catholics used to have brothels that were basically there so men could cheat on their wives with the blessing of God, basically, is what so they...
Pretty much.
Oh my God.
And you paid for the privilege.
And you paid for the privilege. Wow.
You paid for the privilege. So a lot of the
way to pervert something that was so beautiful. Yeah. Way to just freaking pervert it.
And it originally started because back in the 300s and 400s, you had the sacred prostitution still going on, but was slowly being corrupted by the patriarchy at that point. You had different areas of different countries where the shift of balance was going to a more male-dominated versus a balanced kind of look.
Right.
Especially when you had things, because you already had Alexander the Great go through, you already had dealt with, you were already had to deal with Caesar, the Roman Empire was expanding, who basically is nothing more than the Borg on steroids. Thank you very much. Drive through. Yeah, me and the Roman Empire, we're not friends.
We'll have a whole other show about why Caesar sucks. We'll do that later.
Yeah. So when you had gotten to Constantine and him basically converting, it was the ability of the church at that point to basically capitalize and to start basically erupting the whole idea of, well, if we can't beat them, why don't we absorb them and start basically taking in certain aspects of what they do and what they have in order to change them over to basically make them join in with us. So that's what they did. So one of the things, of course, is like the different holidays, like Christmas is actually the celebration of Mithras' birth. You have many other holidays that fall along the same lines. Then you also have the idea too, is that they started doing, well, we can't let women have the powers that they have. So what we're going to do is we're going to demote them to teachers. We're going to demote them to being basically a lower class of being able to teach and love and teach them about love and honor. So when they got to that point, then what they turned around and did and says that if you decided to try to be anything more than that, be the wise woman or whatever, at that point, then you're basically being somebody that you can't be. You're trying to lead. And so they started taking the sacred prostitution portion and said, well, we could still use the money because we got to pay for our war somehow.
Right.
And basically at that point instead of letting slaves have a chance to win their freedom, we're just going to keep them as slaves. And women who piss us off or do whatever, instead of killing them outright, we can actually make them work and tell them that they can get free eventually. Which then they would die of diseases, because unlike in the past where they would have to pay for prostitute tax and keep healthy and they had to have health checks and stuff regularly.
Right. It was like a whole, like, it was not a corrupted profession. And then they just Wow.
Yeah, this was not like in the early days where with Lupinaria, where they actually paid taxes and they had to keep healthy, and it was just one thing that, that the state actually said and mandated. The church basically at that point was coming in such a big push that it was opting out and it was taking over. And basically they were like, yeah, we don't do any. Which is why a lot of times when you get to that time frame, when you get to like the 5, 6, 7, 800 AD area, in England it's called the Dark Ages because there was less written during that time frame. Although there's a lot written, there's not as much as it was prior and post.
Right.
And in Europe itself, you find that though there's things that are written and things that are kept sacred during that time frame that are still dealt with, and you still have information, it is a little bit more of a dearth. You don't have as much info that you wish for because it was more controlled under the church during that time frame. States did not have everything. Hello, puppy. Did not have the control they wish they did. They basically at this point started being brought underneath that rule of code of religion, but religion in a bad way, not in a balanced harmony. And that's basically the hardest part, I think, about all of this, is that when you think about things like the Turin erotic scroll from Egypt, which is like one of my favorite things.
What is this? Educate us.
Oh my God. Okay,
Educate
so first off, the Turin erotic scroll, if you ever want to look it up, it's a papyrus that is from Egypt. There are 12 scenes on the scroll. Mm-hmm. And basically it is part satire. Okay. So you have these old kind of like funny looking ancient Egyptians not in the best of shape.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird because, Egyptians usually look perfection and beautiful.
Right.
So you have this, and they're like doing different things with women, and women are like going out on a pyramid naked. There are animals. There are different bent over. There's toys.
What? This is amazing.
Yeah. And there are pictures. If you go online and you Google up the erotic Turin scroll, it'll bring up images for you so you can actually see the whole thing in its entirety. It is amazing to look at.
That is amazing.
It is, for a long time, it was hidden from public view. Public did not know about it for many, many, many years.
Okay.
Because
now, public, talking about like our public, like, because, okay, got you. Yeah. In Egypt, it was like whatever. Everybody saw it. Everybody read it. It was like in the newspaper every Sunday. Got you.
Yeah, it was known about. They're dating, I think it was dated back to like 1150 BC. So... is where the papyrus is dated to, so it was probably done right around about then. But the idea behind it was the idea of fun and joy for eroticism. Right. So it was kind of like a jokey sex book, for lack of a better term.
This is amazing.
And it's like the best pictures ever. So
I have to see this. I'm Googling this. Right after the show, I'm Googling this.
Yeah. It's like the funniest thing because you look at some of the stuff and you're like, but she's using the pyramid as a dildo. But
how does that even work?
How does that fit?
That doesn't. Oh my God, the sense of humor is amazing. Oh my God, I love it.
And just so you know, it's like 8 feet wide. 8
oh
feet
my
long.
God, it's huge.
It is. It's huge. It's a huge piece of
God.
It's a huge scroll. So there are pieces missing, but they've been able to extrapolate from the pieces that they have what the actual thing looks like because they have enough of it to pretty much put it all together. But yeah, it is a riot. It is one of the things that when I first was learning to read ancient Egyptian, a friend of mine, as a gag, who knew that I knew a lot about sex and basically sexual relationships in history,
right,
and then also loved mythology, thought that this would be like the way to teach me
oh my God
some of this stuff. So they sent me basically a reproduction of it. So I get it and I open it up because it was a birthday gift, and I open it up and the first words out of my mouth was, "Oh my shit, what the fuck are you doing?" And
what did I choose to open? What is happening?
And they were like, "Surprise!" And I was like, dude, you love me. What the hell? How am I going to frame this shit up?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like everybody needs to frame that up. So let me switch gears here a little bit because there is an idea that I've always loved, and I don't know what religion this comes from, but it's the idea of the sacred prostitute as an individual. And I don't know if she's a goddess or the sacred whore or what. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so that general idea originally started in the early 1900s. Basically, and it's from a poem from Babylon.
Okay.
So the idea is the woman at the window.
Okay.
And that's actually the process. And actually, there is a couple of journal studies, and I'll send them to you after. I've got the PDFs for you, that deal with that topic. And it is the idea that the woman at the window is the one that's watching out and looking for her next customer kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the woman at the window is that aspect of the sacred feminine, the goddess who's looking out and who's the sacred whore to bless the world. The other thing is the idea of sovereignty. So there is an archetype with the sacred whore, the sacred prostitute, is the idea of that during times of blessings, there is a specific term, and the brain is like going poof on me right now. In regards, it does. Yeah, it's like, I think it's homogeneous is the term.
Okay.
That basically it's the fertility rite for the blessing of the sacred prostitute upon the earth. So basically she represents the earth, and the sexual union between the god and the goddess.
Okay.
For sovereignty, she would represent sovereignty, and then the king would be the person who would receive her. And that way, that sacred night would be him receiving his kingship from her, from sovereignty. So the sacred prostitute in that regard would be sovereignty. It is something that you see a lot of in a lot of different texts, and that's one of the reasons why that whole concept has continued onward, because of that concept and idea.
Okay.
Is there one sacred prostitute that is in religion? Yeah, no. It depends, because different religions have different aspects. So like love goddesses get the worst rap.
That's because we're stupid and we're ignorant. And it just, even hearing it, when you hear the word whore, it has such a negative connotation now. But I can just recognize that when you're talking about it and we're talking about a sacred whore, we don't mean it. They didn't mean it the way we do now. Now it's this horrible, dirty thing. Thanks, patriarchy. Back then, it was like this beautiful, wonderful, what's your problem type thing. It was like, just, this is what it is.
Yeah. So it's somebody who would bless the land, bless the person, it's that coming of anybody who's ever read the Celtic myth regarding the holly and the oak kings. Basically what happens is that the lady and the oak king always fights against the holly king every year. What happens is the oak king gets the lady pregnant. As the lady is pregnant, and they have their term during the spring and summer, goes into the fall. As you get into the fall, the holly king is born. Holly king matures quickly, because holly does mature quickly.
Okay.
The holly king ends up slaughtering the oak king going into the winter. And the winter king, and then the holly king is then blessed by the lady, who then gets pregnant with the oak king.
And the cycle just repeats.
And it repeats. And that is the whole concept of that whole aspect, is that she is the constant. She is the one giving birth. She is the one who basically takes the seed and puts it forward. And that's the whole concept of the sacred prostitute, is she is the one who puts the blessing forward. She's the one that basically gives the land its food. She's the one that blesses the land with the fertility itself, because without her, there's nothing that blossoms or blooms.
Okay.
So yes, the guy does his part with providing the seed, but she's the one who's the incubating of the ground. Without her and the fertility portion, then there's nothing but seed. And seed doesn't grow without fertility.
Right.
And that's
Real
the part
talk.
that most people don't do it.
Yeah, they forget that part. All right, so I have two questions, and I wrote one down so I didn't forget because I wanted to segue them properly. The first is, and I don't know if you have so much knowledge of mythology. I'm just going to throw shit out, and you can tell me if you know about it or not.
Sure.
Lilith, I have sometimes heard referred to as the sacred prostitute. True, because so here's what I know of Lilith, and this is one of the things where I want to. Lilith being the first wife of Adam, who was like, "Fuck this shit, I'm not serving. Get out of here." So she dipped. So now she's been demonized. So I have heard her take on this mantle as well in a couple of things that I've read. So talk to me a little bit about that. Is it true? Is it not true? You know, let's talk about Lilith because I think she's fucking awesome.
Lilith is an awesome person. So here's the way that Jewish scholars have said about Lilith. So if you read the Bible in the original Aramaic, Lilith isn't mentioned by name.
Okay.
However, if you actually read it, it'll say that there's a gap in how it reads in regards that God created Adam. Mm-hmm. And then there's a gap that says later, then he created Eve. And the way that there is a gap is there's like a gap of time.
Okay.
And it talks about that there's passages later in Genesis that it says that they, because it's talking about that same time frame. So who was the they with Adam?
Right.
And so what Jewish scholars had said back in the day when this all comes up, because Jewish scholars are really known for, as they tear apart sentence by sentence, the Talmud, is that they go through and we're like, well, we have a they. How is that they in this early portion when Eve doesn't come until 5 or 6 verses later?
Right.
So what they decided was that there was a woman in the name Lilith. And Lilith has its own meaning and definition. So Lilith was the very first wife of Adam. Mm-hmm. And that basically she decided she wasn't going to be on the bottom. She was not going to be the servant. Mm-hmm. She wanted to be equal and on par.
Right.
And because he was like, no, because you came second, you are not going to be equal. Lilith said, am I not a creation just as you are of God? Therefore, as equal as you are.
Right.
And because of that, no, ain't happening shit. Goodbye. And she ups and leaves. So at that point, scholars say that she's become one of the main fallen, that basically she joins up with Lucifer. Mm-hmm. She becomes a demon. She becomes demonized and is the eater of children, etc., etc.
Right.
And she's considered basically the very first succubus.
Mm-hmm. I feel like she just got a bad rap for being like,
oh, heck yeah,
I want to be a top. Like, y'all took that. I feel like that escalated so fast when she was just like, I'm a top.
and Jewish scholars will tell you that that if you look at the time frame of it all, you don't really know how much time passed between when Adam was created and then when he said that basically he was lonely because he saw all the other animals were 2 by 2.
Right.
And he was alone. Mm-hmm. So between that, whatever happened with Lilith and then Eve coming, because Eve was a part of him. So you have to wonder, we don't know what that difference in time frame was.
Right.
So it could have been, a good 30, 40, 50 years because there was no really time frame or limit because there was no aging.
Right.
So, and that's one of the things with it is the fact that if Lilith was still considered perfect and was not cursed with dying, and was considered then at that point part of the fallen, mm-hmm. that's one of the reasons why they would have given her kind of a name break. So it's one of those things that when you look at the mythology of Lilith, you kind of go and see the Jewish scholars are basically men mostly. Uh-huh. And most of this is actually during that time frame versus there's now a lot more women scholars. Mm-hmm. So you kind of look at it and go, okay. Mm-hmm. Right. But you get it because like one of my friends who is a Bible scholar in general said, mm-hmm. everything in the Bible pairs off. Okay. There is a duality to everything.
Okay.
And I said, I was like, great. So, you know what my question's going to be, dude? And he's like, I know. And I really hate the fact that you're going to ask. And I said, well, actually, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to tell you is that basically what they did is about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they found statues that date back 10,000 years for a Israelite goddess. Why ain't she mentioned?
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I really hate when you do this to me. And I said, yeah, well,
your book is wrong. The book is so wrong.
Yeah, I was like, so basically, when God said, we created them, who's the we?
Right. Lot of
and he's like, well, I said, well, the Jews don't believe in Jesus, so it can't be Jesus.
Right.
If he's talking collectively about the angels didn't have the act of creation.
Right. So
who is the we?
Who do we? Yeah. If you're not arguing over the translation of this word, buddy, who's we? Who's we? Not to mention all the wrong translations. I know, Pixel. I know. It's terrible. It's terrible. All right. So I have to read up more about her. Her and Lucifer, I feel, get a bad rap too, because Lucifer is so connected to Satan, and they are two completely different entities. But that's a whole different show. So I know Sin's like, we could talk all about that too.
All I have to say is 8 years of comparative religions. Yeah, I can talk about it all day.
I love it. So here would be my question to you, and I'm going to try to phrase this right, because it was like popped into my brain when we were talking earlier, and I wrote it down.
Sure.
So how is there a way, because it sounds like it's sacred prostitution was this beautiful thing, very much tied into what is the word for believing in multiple gods? Very much tied into those types of religions, very respected, at a time where there wasn't this big patriarchy basically wasn't fucking everywhere, and there was more of a balance in these different societies. So we see it in all kinds of different civilizations, and then as Rome flips out, and like you said, the war starts and everything moves towards a male-dominated society, sacred prostitution pretty much just dies, because we basically stop respecting women, is basically what the moral of the story is. And our religion changes as well, so we have a whole different viewpoint on that. So understanding that sacred prostitution was tied not just to this reverence for women, but also tied so much to fertility and religion and that celebration, something we don't do anymore. Is there a way to sort of bring this practice back that makes sense in our current culture and with our very different kind of current religions?
Okay.
I know, it was a big question. I know. I asked a big question.
It's not that it's a big question. It's more like, how do I want to answer this without really getting myself in trouble? It's not going to happen.
Define trouble, because we just say it here.
My past.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right.
Yeah, that's going to end up coming out eventually. It'll end up being part and parcel of whatever it is. It's not like it's super hidden. Anybody who knows me fairly well knows that it's part and parcel of what I've done before. So basically, we do actually have something to that effect now, but it is not completely sacred prostitution per se.
Okay.
Anybody who's participated in BDSM or professional dominatrix and DOMs, it is on par to that whole belief system of respecting who your partner is and respect within that level. Yes, there's sexual release for some professional DOMs and dominatrixes, just so you guys know, do not have intercourse with her.
Yeah, people might not have known that, so now you know. Get educated.
They do not have intercourse with her at all. It's because that would kill 90% of the law.
It's a whole different thing, fam.
There's a whole law breaking thing going on in 50 states, most states. But it's probably the closest we really have right now to sacred prostitution, because a lot of it mimics that concept of basically bringing somebody to a better, higher place, providing them with a safe space to become better and more. And that's one of the things about sacred prostitution was not only to honor the gods and goddesses, but also to honor the person themselves, to give a gift before the gods. So, and a lot of times, especially for the sacred rites and stuff, there is that aspect. So it's probably the closest we have right now
Okay.
to being that way. Can we bring it back? Which is probably the hardest portion to think about, because when I think about bringing it back, I'm think small. Yeah, we can. The biggest thing is, would it be tied to religion?
Right.
Honestly, my preference is not.
Right.
And the reason being behind it is the fact that not everybody boat train with religion.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't want religious control on that portion. And the reason being behind it is I would rather have these men and women be safe. Because men were part of the sacred prostitution aspects.
Right.
They both served, and they served equally well. Yes, there were more women than men, but a lot of that had to deal with certain belief systems within that time frames.
Right. The different cultures. Right.
Yeah. So
could it be more tied around to a spirituality thing? And when I say that, is more, what is the, my brain is collapsing. There is a very, I think it's Indian in nature, Kama Sutra. More in that sort of practice where there's just this kind of connection, and it's soulful and it's deep, and it's more about respect of the act. And like you said, being able to take someone into another state of mind through touch, through that level of intimacy. So it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a religion, but could just be more about the respect of your partner and the situation and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, and one, we can do it ourselves in a lot of ways by having that kind of respect on a level every day when we are with our partners. The other thing too, honestly, is on certain, what I call certain feast days, certain whatever days are special to you, by having and elevating your level of sexual play to having that deeper intimacy. Elevating your spiritual level for elevating theirs, and realizing that it is a deeper meaning, that it is something that is broadening not only your horizon, but also broadening your spirituality between the two of you, or three of you, or four of you, depending if you're poly or not.
Right.
That is something that you can also do. And it actually broadens your scope a lot further. And it also, you'll find that it also makes your relationship stronger. That's one of the things about the sacred prostitution that most people don't realize, is even though they serve the gods, and it was for a very limited time, that, and there's some rule breakers we'll talk about shortly, which were very, very bad.
No.
There was some, and the rule breakers in question got punished really badly. There are ways that with elevating it for yourself and then elevating it for others, it actually gives you a deeper intimacy in the long run. So back in the day, that they would do is there were certain rites that you would prior, purification baths, there were candles, of course, there were scented oils. The idea was that you would arouse that person to a certain point level. So then the sacred act itself was an act that would basically be a blessing, and you would actually be almost aroused to a certain level of point that you would feel like it was almost touching the god.
I got it.
By that point. And that's because of the fact that the whole act from beginning to end was built upon this level.
Right.
Certain phrases and touches and scents and smells. And so by bringing that to your own level of touch, you can do the same fact. And honestly, it's something that I've always been partial to doing, because to me, it's more of intimacy is something that you have to develop and be very respectful of. Not everybody is very good with intimacy.
Right.
And some people who are good with intimacy don't necessarily know how to connect on a better level. Because intimacy can be really tough for some people.
Right.
And other people are really great with intimacy, but don't know how to connect physically.
Right.
They're like, I'm with you in the mind, but it's like, dude, I'm over here. Come here.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where if you start a ritual together, you do the ritual bath, you bathe each other, you go ahead and you do the paints, you do the oils, that heightens your sense of of pleasure for both of you. And then it just makes it that when you get to that point where you're like, if we don't fuck, there's going to be consequences.
That is awesome.
So it's kind of that kind of an aspect. So it's kind of fun because there's a lot of laughing, there's a lot of joy in it, and then afterwards you're kind of like, okay, woo, that was great. And there's a lot of afterwards just like, we're gonna have to do this sometime. It's like, now I'm ready for bed, goodbye. So
and you can go now. Thank you for the wonderful time. Blessed be to the goddess, and get the fuck out.
And, yeah, here's your pants, goodbye.
That is
so
awesome.
Yeah,
that is
so
fantastic.
there are fun things that you can do. And there's actually a couple of books that are that I have always recommended for people if you want to do stuff. I mean, most people know about The Joy of Sex, of course, but there is a book called Sex that's out. It's a small little book. It's literally, I have the book here. It is a little itty bitty book, and it basically talks about playful sex. It's about toys. It's about intimacy. It's about touch. It gives you little tips and tricks just to be able to be intimate. And one of the fun parts about it is the fact that it's like itty bitty little things that you kind of go, well, why would this make a difference? And they explain why it makes a difference. And it's nice because it's like this little itty bitty portable book by about 1.5 inches thick, and it slides into your purse or into your backpack, and it's good to go, and it hides on your shelf. Nice. The other thing is honestly, if you ever get a chance to take a massage class, even if it's just to learn how to do just basic massage for yourself, do it, because massage for yourself and for your partner is one of the most intimate things you can do, and it's also one of the most sacred things you can do.
That is awesome.
It's also something that you see a lot of in a lot of the different notes that are there. So it is one of the things about rubbing oils, especially in ancient Greece, ancient Romans. Also, actually, believe it or not, in ancient Turkey, even in the Egyptians. So it's something that the idea of touch has this aspect of massage as not only being an initiator towards sex, but it also has the idea of connecting that touch with the other person and instituting a good touch, a touch to be remembered, a touch to bring sacred goodness. So that kind of thing is beneficial, but it also initiates a closeness to a person that's not forgotten. And it's really kind of one of those things that I always tell people for those who are rape survivors, is that once you learn how to give a massage, you're likely to learn to take a massage back, and you learn to get good touching. So you're able to, you learn how to accept touch. Victims have that problem with learning to accept touch, and it's one of the things that when I used to work with a lot of rape survivors, when I worked in Florida, that I would do is that I used to give classes on couple massages with rape survivors and their family members.
I mean, you talk about people who would just, you would love to be able to take them to the temples if they still existed today. I mean, anybody who if you were hurt in that particular way and you just can't, go to the temple. But now we don't have them anymore. I mean, oh my God, why is patriarchy is so stupid. It's so stupid.
A lot of it, I think, is the fact that for guys and for women, and because here's the thing about the whole patriarchy thing, women also gave up on themselves.
Absolutely.
So I mean, patriarchy kind of pushed and shoved and basically said, we are men, we have swords, we can do this. And women but at the same time too, women were told and reinforced that you are this beautiful symbol of femininity, and you have to be cared for, and you have to be this. And after a while of being told this enough, they kind of backed off of their own power. And they forgot that a lot of these women at one point in time were warriors that stood beside their men and fought just as fiercely, fought just as hard, owned land, were able to divorce and marry whoever the hell they wanted. So
the power was forgotten.
Yeah, they basically started believing the spin doctors and basically started buying into it. So it's a combination of both are at fault. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
patriarchy is more at fault than the women, but the women also could have said, yeah, not really.
Right.
Um, La Lestrata is one of my favorite stories because of that.
Okay. Okay.
um, it's if you've never read the play, I would highly recommend it. It is one of my favorites because it is all about women in basically a Greek town who refuse to have sex with their men until they stop the war.
That is awesome.
And the women in the other town that was part of the fight agreed to the same. Yes. So this is during a different time where women didn't have as much right still, and they decided to use what rights they did have, which was they still had the right over their own body, and they said, yeah, there ain't none until you guys stop. We're tired of having to bury boys and bury men. We want our men back. And
fucking awesome.
Yeah, you ain't getting it until this fucker ends. So bye. So yeah,
that is amazing. That is amazing.
And it is the funnest play because it was the way that it was written in a way to be kind of like a funny comedy, but in the same way, kind of sarcasm to the idea, the concept of women having this kind of power, but also to show that women did have that kind of power.
Right.
It was kind of like, get your women under control kind of deal. And yet at the same time, it was kind of like, women, you do have this. So if you really are bothered about your sons dying in these wars right now,
right,
then fucking stand up and do something.
Exactly.
And so that was kind of when that play was written. That was kind of the two sides of the coin, because the author in question didn't want to really say, go and tell them you're not having sex. But at the same time, didn't want to sit there and say, my sons and your sons are all dying. What the hell are we doing in this war? Because just like in the time of Shakespeare couldn't afford to offend the people who were going to pay for his plays.
True that. Sometimes you gotta play to your crowd. You gotta play it. You gotta
blend it in.
You gotta put it in a way that people will understand and won't get you killed. That's just sometimes the time that you were living in. All right, so I will let this go for about 10 more minutes. What topic have we not covered that you would really like to share with people that maybe they've gotten wrong or need to know about sacred prostitution? That's a big question too, because you've got so much info in your glorious, glorious brain.
So people often talk about like the geisha of Japan.
Ooh, love it.
About being like concubine and sex. They're not.
Really?
Let's clear this up right now.
Let's do it.
So first off, geisha are trained courtesans. So most of the time there may not be sex involved at all. Can there be? Yes. Is it most often? Yeah, not really. In ancient times, more likely. They did have special rooms, but the thing is it was a business place. This is where men went to be with men because there was no men hangout. And these women were intelligent. They were like the Hetare. They were trained, intelligent, able to speak, play music, be able to recite poetry. They were current on the news of the day. And they were there to help men relax. And basically were there to actually facilitate business dealings.
Oh, wow.
So they were not your conventional prostitutes. They were not there to be the whole let's have sex and I'm going to be this lovely little makeup and no.
Right. Whole different. It's not like having a business deal in a strip club. This is a whole different thing.
Oh God, heck no. This is like, this is way beyond. This is like an elevated form to where if you're lucky, they may let you touch, they might let you touch her leg, maybe her breast if you're really lucky. Behind closed doors for like 5 minutes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Now, if you want to pay a few million, maybe you might be able to get lucky that way. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things that most people don't realize. The same with the Hetare. Hetare were learned courtesans of their time, but they were also slaves.
Where from?
Being free.
Where were the Hetare
from? Greek.
From Greek. Okay.
They're from Greek. So basically, they were a lot of times slaves. So they were slaves that were trying to be freed. So they were from all over the continents. They were basically learned Greek. They learned how to speak different languages. They were the business associates, the courtesans of their day. So, did they have sex? Yes. Were they all about sex? Yeah, no, not always. Their thing was a lot of men couldn't bring their women out in public because those women were supposed to be protected at all costs. They were also, so these women were the ones that were basically the representative of the wife. So they were the sacred prostitute in that sense, that they were the wife's representative when the man went out.
Okay.
So they had to be literate on so many different, so many different ways. Were they also the sex partners of these guys? Yes. I'm not going to tell you they're not. Were they the ones were they owned by the temple? A lot of times, yeah. Temples were the ones that basically owned pretty much all the brothels in the area. A lot of taverns and brothels were owned by the temples. They owned by the state. They owed money to the state, dudes. They had taxes. Their tax rate were on par to what most people wish that regular businesses nowadays paid.
Wow.
So, yeah. So you're talking that an average prostitute would pay more in taxes than most of our big businesses pay.
Damn.
Yep. And in return, they got health care. They were taken care of. They had a warm place to stay. And they were treated with respect.
Wow. Wow. Boy, we got to grow up. We got to grow up as a society, man.
We kind of fucked that over.
Yeah,
really hard.
Did. Oh my god. Oh my. And you know what? You said something earlier, and I want to briefly touch upon it because I feel like people have trouble with this as well. And that's the difference between intimacy and sex. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because intimacy and touch, because a lot of people, as soon as the word intimacy comes up, minds immediately go to the dirty place, and that's fine. That's totally cool. But I will never shame anybody for having a dirty mind. It's awesome. I got property there.
I live it. Like place below the gutter.
Dirty minds, dirty minds, dirty minds, dirty minds. Yeah. So, because especially when, it was very beautiful when we were talking earlier just about, if you're a victim of sexual assault and learning massage, and that can be a wonderful thing too, to just get one and receive one. And that can be a very intimate moment that's not really sexual at all. It's just about intimacy and kind of relearning. And then you can also have an intimacy of the minds as well. So talk a little bit about that too, and maybe tie it into this sacred prostitution.
So one of the things that a lot of people mistake is that intimacy always has to lead to sex. Yeah, no. The reason why is the fact that we have, as a society, have basically tied in anything that has to be touch related is good touch or bad touch. Now, the thing of it is you could give somebody a hug and it's intimate. So the idea is, well, is that a good touch or is it a bad touch? And that's where we kind of fuck people over in the mind. Hugs can be bad and they can be good, depending on, am I hugging this person because I don't want them to run away because I'm going to steal them? Or am I hugging them because I love this person so much because they're part of my life?
Right.
So the big thing about intimacy is that intimacy is on so many different levels. And one of the things about intimacy is that it comes from the heart. It comes from a love for a child, a love for self, a love for other, a love for your nation. So intimacy grows from a place of self first. So people who are rape survivors or are survivors of any kind of disaster of any kind.
Men and women. I think
men and women.
Men and women.
Oh yeah. Men and women. So if you were in a car accident and were disfigured, or if you were even if you were I have a friend who was shot hunting about 2 years ago. It was like a freak shot. It was basically like a 1 in a billion chance. It had ricocheted off of a tree.
Oh God!
It hit just right, and it hit the sign and popped and got him in the. And for the longest time, he would not let his wife touch his arm.
Oh wow!
Ever would not let his wife touch his arm. And I came over and I was like, dude, what the hell? And I grabbed his arm and he's like, don't. I'm like, dude, I get it. You feel it's disfigured. You've got this big scar now. I said, but you know what? I can tell that the way you're holding it, it's tightening up on you. I brought my stuff with me. I brought my aromatherapy. Let me work on it. I'll leave your shirt sleeve down. I'll work underneath it. So what I did is over a period of like an hour, I would massage it for a little bit, use the oil and butter on it, and then he started relaxing. After like about half an hour, I started pushing the sleeve up little by little. After about an hour in, I had the sleeve all the way up. His wife came over and sat next to me and started stroking on his arm. And about an hour and a half in, he looks over and he goes, huh? And I said, what? He goes, I didn't realize that I was really kind of afraid of it. I was afraid that people would be disgusted by it. I'm like, dude, you're still who you are.
Right.
It's just a scar. But mentally, he had that block. And so he was putting blocks to the intimacy up because he felt he was now no longer valid.
Right.
So touch is one of the biggest ways for intimacy and to break intimacy blockers. So it's a step-by-step process. It's initiating small touches, holding a hand, striking the back of a wrist. It is a small stroke across the cheek. It's learning to give someone a hug and know how long to hold, count of 2, count of 3,
right,
kind of thing, and then slowly working up into the intimacy factors. And intimacy can be sexual, but honestly, sexual intimacy is sexual intimacy.
Right.
Intimacy itself is just intimacy. It is on a level. I have intimacy with a couple of friends, all in the mind, and it is some of the best moments in my life that I have some of the best conversations ever.
Right.
And it is a connection like anything else I've ever. We could talk about all sorts of shits we have for hours.
Right.
And it's a different intimacy. And they're like some of the best people on earth. And right now it's summer. So they're in uni right now teaching. And then in October, November, they'll go back to Egypt to excavate.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, but it's a type of intimacy that you learn to grow. So it's a different.
Is this
kind
something
of
that you would learn as well, being able to go to one of these temples? And kind of because I feel like that's something that you would be taught. I mean, there's just a level of education that I think that would have come with having these priestesses, sacred prostitutes, whatever you want to call them, be accessible to anyone, that would have just kind of given us that knowledge.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that most people get is that's part of also what the priestly class did, for both the priests and the priestesses, is that was part of their instruction to the sacred prostitutes. It was also part of their instruction to the masses. So you would come to the temple to not only learn about the stories, the mythology of their day, but you would also come to learn how to be a better person. So part of being a better person was being part of that intimacy factor, being part of being touched by the God. So having the priest being able to anoint you, having a sacred prostitute being able to hold you, guide you into the waters to be cleansed, to have someone wash you versus being self-washed, and having that intimacy and knowing that somebody cares enough for you and being taught about that caring and then being able to give that caring to somebody else and teach that caring back is part and parcel of what that temple life was like. And those people would have actually, when they would have left the temple, would have been bringing that into their family life when they got married or when they went for it. And so that actually basically promulgated that whole factor of that intimacy and caring. So when things shifted and changed, like when Alexander the Great conquered and that whole, let's put this person in charge, let's put this person in charge, it makes a difference. Because then you started seeing a shift in a bit more on how the relatives of how the intimacy works, what festivals shifted slightly. Like when the Ptolemies took over, you see certain things still continued like they were, but then you also see more of a shift of divine right, that certain things at the temple were this, and that the divine pharaohs, the Ptolemies, were not touchable. Thus, the gods now have become further apart from you. So the priestly caste then takes a step back. So the only people who are left for that intimacy then is then the sacred prostitutes. So you start seeing a pulling back from the people.
It's and I look at it because I'm told it's what we call it the WooWoo Hour podcast. I come from a strong spiritual background, just from my own research. What a disconnect that is. I mean, it's a giving away of your power, and it is a complete disconnect, and it explains so much. I mean, once you had this wonderful connection, not just to the individual, but to yourself and to the gods and goddesses that you revered, and then slowly but surely now you lose that. So you no longer respect the land. You no longer respect, the one that gave you life. You just lose respect for all of this, and this disconnect just leaves you in this bubble, and it's just terrible.
It's scary.
Wow. Yeah. That leads to a whole host of problems.
Well, you think about it in terms, it's like a friend of mine and I were talking recently about that. We were talking about the whole concept of when you step back from your responsibility as a caretaker, and take caretaker of the land. So you figure from being part of the temple, being part of that whole aspect of being who you are as a caretaker, and going into the Industrial Revolution, where then you become not just no longer a caretaker of the land, but you're going into a society where it's all about the things. It's all about of what can we make faster and better. It's a disconnect on a higher level, and not understanding consequence. Because at that point, you're in the early days where you don't understand any of that. You just understand that I can make these things work.
Right.
I don't test to see what the end results are.
Oh my God, we're such children. We're like, I'm just gonna do the thing, and then I'm not even gonna worry about the consequence. So, that's a child. The thought process of a child. Wow.
Yeah, and that's one of the things like I tell people all the time is that Americans are teenagers versus people in Europe and in Africa, and that because a lot of their cities, a lot of those countries are older than we are. Yes, some of the countries have been realigned, renamed, but they have actually been around a lot longer than we have. And we as a country do not act in ways that are mature enough to honor our country or honor our land. We don't honor the sacred bond between the land and ourselves. We don't take care of our land. We don't act as stewards. And we're now reaping the benefits, or what we want to call benefits, which is actually destroying us. So you're looking at kids who are sicker when they're born, have less ability to adapt, who basically are coming with more allergies, more problems.
Right.
And it's all stuff that we did to ourselves because we did not check ourselves, check what we were doing.
Right.
Because we forgot our sacred responsibility.
Yeah, we did.
And that's part of what the temples were doing, is that they owned a lot of the land. So people who worked the land knew that they had a sacred responsibility to take care of the land because they were serving the temple, who was serving them. It was hard, back-breaking work, but there was balance.
That'll give you a level of respect for having to do it.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Shoot. I worked a tobacco field and a cotton field for 1 year, and I did it for a season for each. And let me tell you,
buddy, I bet. Oh my God, Sin, thank you so much for this conversation. This has been incredibly enlightening. My writer's brain is going crazy right now, and now I know you have no idea. You have no idea what's going on in my brain right now. That's literally it. I'm gonna bring you back to talk about a whole host of topics. You're just fantastic.
Oh my God. We'll end up doing like the tarot.
Yeah, we need to talk about the tarot and the astrology and all that good shit. Absolutely. Yeah. So tell people where they can find you, how they can get in touch. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Problem. So you can find me online at Cynnara.com, on Twitter at Cynnara, and on Instagram at Cynnara.Tregarth. I even check in on it every once in a while. So yay. Go me.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Do follow Cyn. She's got some good stuff in the works. I'm going to make her website the bomb. We're going to get to that. Don't worry. Don't judge it yet. It's fine. Just go there, read some stuff, and then I'm going to make it pretty. Don't worry.
She's going to make it all pretty for me.
I'm gonna. You got courses coming up and a new tarot deck that you're writing and books and all kinds of stuff, right?
All sorts of stuff. I got like 3 new books that I got to put out. I got a editor's course, a writer's course. What else? Writer's course, editor's course. I have a combo course for both, and then I also have a tarot course that'll be coming available too.
Girl, yes. Love it. Yes.
So that's gonna be fun.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll teach you the Cyn way of reading the tarot, which requires you not to memorize anything. So.
My brain just collapsed. You said, in order to read the tarot, you have to not memorize anything.
Well, see, the thing is most people will tell you that you have to memorize the book. Mm-hmm. So there's like, they have the little, it's called the LWB, which is the little, so it has like all the definitions. So if you have the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, there is standard definitions that come, like the 3 of Swords, which shows the heart with the 3 swords in it is for a broken heart.
Right.
Broken everything. So one of the things is that before there was the Rider-Waite-Smith, there was the Marseille deck. The Marseille deck has no writing on it. And there is basically, you go by what is on the deck itself, what's there. The pips have no writing. The pips have no symbols except, and it doesn't even tell you how number. It doesn't tell you that it's like the 9 of Pentacles. It doesn't say anything. There's nothing.
Wow. Wow.
So one of the things that I learned was the fact that different decks. So one of the nice things about the decks is that I'm going to teach that the course is that you pick your favorite deck, and we're going to learn to read the deck without using the book. Because there's things that you always remember from, like, there's certain cards that you remember best,
right?
And the reason why is because those are the cards that resonate with you better. So one of the things that I tell everybody is that one of the things that I've done over the years is I've learned tarot, and I have some deck cards memorized from whatever, but most of mine I remember is because I just look at the card and I can look at what's on the card and tell exactly what it's about, and I just go from there. So
I love it.
A lot of the stuff that you see on there tells you what to do. So so that's going to be fun to do. Yes, I'm excited
for this course. Yes.
So
all
that's going to be the fun part. That's going to be the part that's going to be interesting, because I have a video on which is my Alexander YouTube channel. So that has about harmonics and disharmonics in tarot. So how you can tell the cards what's in harmony and what's not in harmony. So you can tell what's more resonant to what's happening versus what you need to be aware of. So there'll be more videos like that. There's going to be things in when you go to read a cards, how to group the cards together appropriately. So like people will lay out cards and we'll just read them straight across, which is perfectly fine.
Right.
I tend to lay out my cards that way, and then I tend to group them.
Okay.
Because then what happens is I tend to see like how they are grouped up. So are they more
you see the story,
cuts, more stories? Yeah, and you find out like certain cards will look at each other. So certain cards look one way, certain people look another way, depending on the card. So when you see that they're looking towards something, what are they looking towards? So that leads you to your next card, which leads you to the next card.
That sounds gloriously intuitive. I love that.
So that's one of the things that you're going to learn how to do. So the nice thing is once you learn those techniques, you'll find your style of reading that's always going to be accurate for you.
Awesome. Because
that's my biggest thing, is that so many times people learn and read one way because this is the way they're taught, is the way.
Right.
And there's no one way. There is your way.
Got it.
And your way is always going to be the best way that resonates with you and gives you the most accuracy at the time. So.
So would you, now we're not going to get too much into the tarot this time, we're going to go, but really quick, would you recommend then that you learn to read the tarot for yourself as opposed to getting the cards read for you?
So
I know. I asked the questions.
I read for myself for certain things. Now, if it's a big thing, I have friends who've done tarot for years and years that I go to get a reading from, because when it becomes like a big ticket item, like when I was moving, and I wanted to know what to expect over the next like 3 months or whatever, I was like, yeah, this is one that I will probably would try to
you're biased. Well, right. You won't read it the right way. I got you. Okay.
So I was like, I don't want to influence the cards, and more
you need an impartial party.
I wanted to sit there and not read what I wanted.
Gotcha.
So it was more like, yeah, whatever. But I always pick a card every single day. So
really?
I pick a card out of my tarot deck. I pick a card out of one of my oracle decks. I pick whatever deck I want to. Out of the day, whatever appeals to me. Recently, it's been the Moonology deck. So it's been that kind of thing. So every day is a new card. It gets journaled. And the nice thing about it is that usually whatever card I pick out for the day usually has relevance to whatever's happening for the day.
Okay.
So today was all about strength, which is a major arcana card. So today has been about getting back my strength and not walking in the land of crap-tastic moments.
That's real talk. Real talk right there.
Yeah.
All right, we're done. Guys, go and check out Cyn. Check out her website. Please follow her. She's pretty active over on the Twitter, occasionally on the Instagram. We will definitely have her back. This Vodcast, now a Vodcast, will return at some point next month. Like, I'm really picky with guests, guys. I say that all the time, but it's true. I'm compiling a list of guests. And I'm so picky. I'm compiling a list of guests and topics that I want to cover, so I have to find the right people to talk about them. Because we get woo-woo up in here, but we're not going to get like tinfoil hat woo-woo unless I think that it's like some good information and we need to talk about fucking tinfoil hats, but I don't think we do.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we could get tinfoil hatty. I mean, I was like that the other day.
You know? It's true. All right, guys, stick around. Thank you so much to all the new followers. If you're listening over on YouTube or over on my channel, give it a like, give it a resubscribe, a tweet, a comment. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you guys want to hear about on this. We will hopefully be back next month with a new guest. We will see. We'll see who I can get to come on here and wrap up. I got some ideas.
There you go.
Yeah, make sure peeps that you're live with us. Stick around. We're going to do some gaming here. I'm going to go on a short break, and then we'll be back. I love your faces. Thank you for hanging out.